Bench Opinions. Three idiots with amateur analysis.
Welcome to Bench Opinions. This is the rugby recap of the British and Irish Lions. Our esteemed host, who usually sits here, Maximilian, is unfortunately not here because I don't know what he's doing. He's probably wading in the waves in Mallorca.
Yeah, always at the airport already. I don't know.
Always at the airport, yeah. Enjoying more sun than we have.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Dominic and I will be playing paddle for a third time in the row in the rain.
It looks good though. I did get caught. Got a wet dog look going on here because I got caught in the rain on a little bit of a scooter ride over here. I was running late, so I was like, let me get there quickly. And as I got on, I was like, oh, that cloud is ominous, and it was.
So, and it followed you.
Yeah, a little bit.
Another place where it rained was in Sydney, Australia on the weekend. The British and Irish Lions finished the test series there, losing to Australia. A lot of, I wouldn't say contentious, but a lot of interesting things that happened in that game. One of them being the rain that came pouring down. Just run us through what happened on that esteemed Saturday.
First of all, I think Australia just finally getting reward for some of the positive signs they've shown over the whole series, I would say. I mean, the first game was a bit of they just seemed ill prepared. And just growing into the series, it has to be said. So coming out of the blocks relatively quickly, 8 points up when the rain hit, sort of just early in the second half, I think in the 43rd or the 44th minute, and the players having to go off for an extended break. I don't actually know how long it was in the end, but a considerable amount of time. And then coming on and they seem to just deal with the pause in play much better than the British and Irish Lions. The British and Irish Lions have to be said, obviously, I wouldn't call it their first string side. I think there were some changes made. I think some of them highly symbolic. I would almost say someone like Bandiaki on the balance of play probably doesn't start that test match if they haven't already won the series, but came in and didn't perform very well, let's be honest. I don't think he had a great game. But yeah, Australia getting it across the line. And Nick White's final test match, I won't miss him. I think a lot of opposition fans won't miss him, but a good servant of Australian rugby. So that's kind of my summation of how things kind of worked out. And there was a sense of inevitability to it, I think, as well, for a lot of people in hindsight.
Okay.
Thinking that, particularly, I mean, we can get into the way the two teams behaved after the second test match and how much the British and Irish Lions celebrated and what we think of that. But there was a sense of sort of the British and Irish Lions that checked out a little bit, I would say. And in hindsight, like with Australia growing into the series, maybe not the biggest of surprises, even though I called 3-0 at the beginning, but didn't expect the series to kind of develop the way it did.
Was my position like this? Yeah, interesting that you say that, because looking at the teams were pretty similar from the British and Irish Lions. They didn't make too many changes, and Bunny Aki actually did start, if I'm not mistaken, the second test. So it's not too crazy that he started the third one. I found it interesting that the British and Irish Lions were very vocal about wanting to go for that 3-0 sweep. So it's one thing saying that they want to do something. It's another thing then actually getting yourself up emotionally to go and do it. And as you said, it did kind of feel like they faded away a little bit in that game.
So I actually only saw this in the post-match of the third test. Some of the footage of very clear, I think quite alcohol-fueled celebrations by the British and Irish Lions after the second test match, them having won the series. I was relatively shocked at that. That's not something that I would expect.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I think there's obviously the symbolism of the British and Irish Lions is a bit different to when you're playing for your national side. I think there's this aura to it, this understanding of, okay, well, we're not going to, you don't get this privilege often. It's only every 4 years, etc. But I still found it strange personally. I don't know if I'm a British and Irish Lions fan, if that's what I want to see. I don't know if I want to see them being focused and save your celebrations for after the third test match, for a variety of reasons. But also a lot of these players are going on holiday after this third test match for the British and Irish Lions. Then go drink into your trip to Mykonos. So that's something that I found strange, and I think must have had an effect on their preparation. And you just had another podcast running here about the guys talking about also the way the players, and this is very subjective, but the way the players behaved in that break for rain, some of the British and Irish Lions sort of sleeping on beanbags and on their phones. For example, Finn Russell, I remember seeing Finn Russell very relaxed on his phone in that break, which I find is interesting. I mean, each player needs to deal with it their own, and a lot of people, again, hindsight is 2020, so because Australia got it over the line, a lot of people looking at Australia and going, look, they seemed like they wanted to do business and they wanted a little bit more, which is also fair enough.
I think the drinking aspect is not too crazy. I think the British and Irish Lions are always drinking on tour. It is a very unique thing. It's a very unique thing to get selected for. It only happens every 4 years. It's sort of like a World Cup, but it doesn't have it's got more of like a barbars feeling to it in a way, because it's like this mixed group of guys, and you're not fighting for your nation but for a region more so. So I think that drinking aspect it can be understood from the cultural perspective, from the celebratory perspective, but no doubt about the fact that it probably had an effect on the boys leading into that final test. Let's talk about the break. So it was halftime. I think at the time it was 8-0 to Australia. Halftime ended. The boys came back on. James Ryan got a really nasty knock, and he was actually out cold for a couple of minutes. And as he was getting carted off the field, one of the officials came on and said, "We have to leave the field for half an hour. We've had a lightning strike within 10 kilometers." And so the teams had to leave, and even like some of the audience had to, from the lower stands, had to leave and go to other parts of the stadium for protective cover, I guess. You just mentioned it, the way that the teams were going about like recovering, but also like how you deal with like communication in that time, because I assume it's something that doesn't happen very often, right? So how did you feel that Australia dealt with it?
As I said, I think at the time I didn't take too much notice of it, and I think it's difficult to look back at it and not through the lens of knowing what happened in the game and how Australia kind of definitely took the initiative. I think you would argue when they were 8-0 up and the rain happened or the lightning happened and they had to come off, you probably would have said, the team that it suits the least right now is Australia. But when they came back on, you would say, wow, after the break, the team that sort of seemed to revel it in the most was Australia. So that's the weird thing about it. Look, again, you don't know what's said in the catacombs of the stadium. I can only go by what was shown and, people like Finn Russell being on their phones and stuff. But Australia, I think, mirrored what I'm sure was going on in that team. And I said it last week in the podcast, I said they just had to find a way to win that game. I think in the bigger scheme of things, they had to find a way to win that game. And I think it translated in the way that, they seem to be very together. They seem to try and use the time as productively as possible. Almost like it was quite regimented, and the coaches really rose to the occasion and said, listen, we have to try and use this time to make sure we come out firing. Whereas I think the British and Irish Lions, and, all respect to them, they'd won the series already. I think, who am I to judge, and who am I to say what were the goals for them, Was the goal to come in and win the series? Cool, then they've done that. And maybe the extra carrot that was dangled was 3-0, but it seems like they were just very chuffed to get the series win. But it did kind of tell a little bit that maybe they checked out a bit. Or at least didn't take it as seriously. I don't know.
In the post-match conference with the British and Irish Lions, so with Andy Farrell and with Tadhg Bowen, they did say that they were aware of, the timings and whatnot and how long it was going to take until they could go back onto the field. There was actually, you need to strike an agreement with the opposition team as to how much warm-up time there is and all these different things. And you did see Australia come onto the field exactly at the 10-minute mark that they had allocated. Whereas the British and Irish Lions had given themselves another 5 minutes in the shed just to, I don't know if they were warming up there or if they just wanted to sort of take their minds off of it. But Andy Farrell said that was their strategy. That's what their specialists had recommended they do. So it wasn't like they were like far-assing around anything. Even being on phones and stuff like that, I was listening, as you said, I was listening to this podcast just before we started this one. And Sir John Kerwin from New Zealand and Victor Matfield from South Africa, and they were saying that in a situation like that, it is actually quite good for you to just completely forget about rugby because you've just got such a long break. Forget about rugby so that when you get back into it, then you're fresh and you've almost like hit a reset button. So there's obviously different approaches of going about it, and there's probably a different approach for the individual players as well about like, would you like to stay in the mindset or would you like to go out of the mindset? What was telling, as you said, is that Australia seemed to have dealt with it better. A lot of people, especially the commentators, were talking about the fact that you had some very important changes to the squad in Topu and Nick White, obviously giving them essentially 40 minutes break. It sort of gives them longer legs so that they can go deeper into the game.
Yeah.
How did that have an impact, especially when it comes to like scrums and stuff like that?
Well, Topu was one of the standout players for sure.
Sorry, and Skelton.
Yeah, and Skelton.
He wasn't new to this test match, but
yeah. Topu is going to be a big loss for Australia because he's going overseas now to Racing 92, which is something we can also talk about as we look at the phase now going out of this series into the future of Australian rugby. But there's no doubt that I wouldn't call him dominant at scrum time, but he was very good at scrum time. The Australian scrum had very few issues. On top of that, I think also the set plays generally. I mean, the British and Irish Lions had an absolute shit show at line-out time.
Yeah, really
I
struggling.
think 6 or 7 were stolen, and also at crucial times because there were a lot of times where the British and Irish Lions did have territory, were looking to try and move into that Australian 22 and score points, and time and time again that line out let them down. And what was interesting to me is a lot of the time it wasn't even directly contested. A lot of the times sort of the Australians just seemed to outread them. So I think Nick White anyway, the fact that he could play longer into his final test match, being a clear leader in that squad, and Topu, I mean, once we saw him in absolute tears during the anthems, that obviously means a lot for him to play for Australia. And I think those kind of personalities get you across the line. And maybe you understand even more so the bigger picture of, I mean, Nick White's leaving, so is Topu, which is sad for Australian rugby, but understanding what this means for Australian rugby moving forward to get this win and not get humiliated on home soil.
You mentioned at the beginning that you're not necessarily the biggest fan of Nick White. He definitely had an impact coming in for the first time into this series. I mean, he did play for his club when they played against the British and Irish Lions, but first time playing for Australia, he had a massive impact. Not only physically, passing wise, accuracy, managing the game very well, but also getting under the British and Irish Lions skin.
I think you can use the word disruptive as a great sort of headline for this test in general. And I think because of the disruption of the rain, because of the whole, even just disruptive thoughts maybe creeping into the British and Irish Lions being 2-0 up in the series, and then disruptive characters like Nick White, really, really, as you said, getting under the skin. And it was a moniker of the whole test match was that Australia, every time the British and Irish Lions tried to get some momentum, they disrupted them enough to kind of foil them. As the game progressed, they managed to turn that into getting across the whitewash and extending that 8-point lead before the rain. So, yeah, Nick White, I think that was what I would associate with him and his career was obviously very loud and present as a scrum half. I think someone maybe out of the little more of the old school scrum half block, like a proper terrier in every sense. Also someone that has managed to kind of be a constant in probably one of the tougher periods in Wallaby rugby history. So that takes some doing as well. And a lot of calls for people saying they think it's maybe come a little bit too soon.
No, premature, yeah.
Maybe a little bit premature, but I'm sure there's reasons for that. And we can get into also now what you're starting to see from this Australian team. But, McDermott, fantastic impact as well throughout the series, getting across the whitewash again in the second half to sort of put the nail in the coffin of the British and Irish Lions. And he looks great. I think he's 26, so there's definitely a ready-made replacement for Nick White there.
So because of the disruption of the rain, we had Australian players going, especially their key players and their big boys. I mean, Topu weighs like 150 kilograms, Skelton weighs 150 kilograms. I mean, the combined weight between them is like just 100 plus or something like that.
Yeah, that lock pairing is ridiculous. I think it's
lock pairing.
Close to 300 kilograms, yeah.
Bringing a guy like Nick White on who had an amazing performance. Then also the British and Irish Lions suffering from some injuries, Tom Curry going off, Ryan obviously going off with his head injury. Then you had the yellow card with Kelleher going off, so Dan Sheehan having to come back on. Would you say that third test match is almost irrelevant because of the losses at the end of a long tour to the Lions having an impact, and then also just, essentially them saying, well, we've done it already, we don't really need to win this last one? Or do you think that last test match is still valuable in this in looking at the performance of Australia and saying like, okay, they actually fronted up?
Well, you have to put it all in context. I think I saw someone say that Australia won 4 out of the 6 halves in this test series, and that's telling. That is really, really telling. I think you can easily also say that the Australians bottled it in the second test match, right? So all of a sudden, you're looking at a couple things go in another direction, and you've got a British and Irish Lions team that have failed to win a tour to a team that was given no chance.
Yeah.
I think it's easy for the British and Irish Lions, particularly Andy Farrell, to just point at the scoreboard and say, "Hey, man, it's another series win.
Yeah.
I'm going to forget about the British and Irish Lions now and possibly go back to Irish rugby at some point and take up some sort of a role there, if I feel like it or not. But I'm a series winning Lions coach. But the factors I just pointed out are just huge for Australia moving forward. So I think that's the balance of play, and I think the Australians have nowhere to hide. They do not have to hide in the slightest. It was a valiant effort, I would say, and I don't think it's easy enough, and I don't think the fruits are hanging low enough for the Lions to talk that away.
I think we're both in agreement there. You've got to actually sort of acknowledge how well Australia played. Sure, that first match got away from them. As we said in multiple other episodes that we've done talking about this series, obviously they had not played much rugby together since December. I think they had played that one game against Fiji, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So you definitely saw those connections and those pairings build, and the synergy between the team build, and that culminated in a pretty dominant victory in that last test, I would say. I mean, the one try. Okay, I mean, I'm not on the field, and I wasn't the ref for like 2 meters away from it, but to me, it looked like it was held up, that first one. So then you're looking at a very, very like low scoring score for the British and Irish Lions in that last test. So I think, as you said, if that second test had gone a little bit differently, if a penalty had been called for the clear out, or the try hadn't been allowed for the dive from Dan Sheehan in that second one, suddenly you've got a 1-1. And going into the third one, who knows? It could have gone either way, right? If this was the decider, then it would have gone Australia's way, and that would have been crazy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is a good point maybe now to what score would you give each of the teams? Let's go by the American system of A+ being very good and the rest being whatever. Where would you put the British and Irish Lions in terms of, and I let's not talk about the piss about games during the week, just the 3-match series against Australia.
Honestly, I wouldn't put it too high. I would probably give them a B+. They won the series, so you can't take that away from them. They managed to get, I would almost say they managed to sneak it through against a side that was considered not to be very strong. And I thought that the players that they had, or the players that they have, are so phenomenally good that they should have been able to produce a lot more than what they did.
Yeah, I'm in a similar space. I would probably make it B-, to be honest, just because of, look, I mean, obviously there's so many factors into judging them, and there's a lot of hypotheticals, and the biggest hypothetical, and I think this is why the neutral would have so badly wanted Australia to win one of those first 2 test matches, was, do we see a much more dominant display from the Lions in the third test match if it meant they had to get it over the line? And I would argue yes. I think if the full might of that team is on display to try and get the series win, I think you do see them really get one over the Australians. But that didn't happen. And now again, you look at sort of the general state of play, and I would give it a B minus. That's kind of where I'm at. I think it's harsh to say anything else. They got the job done, but as you said, the big, crazy, scary factor is just the amount of quality in that side, the amount of experience in that side. Just dwarfs, at least on paper, dwarfs what the Australians had. So I would have, and that's why I called a 3-0.
Yeah,
and they were very close to losing the series. So, yeah.
Okay, now we've adjudicated the British and Irish Lions. What would you give the Australians?
I'd actually give them a B+. And I think the B+ is more looking sort of beyond the series as well, and what the series seems to have done. For example, state of origin in Australia is a massive thing. It's a big week and weekend of sports, I think. They correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the timings, but it's essentially New South Wales against Queensland, and they play rugby league against each other, rugby union, all sorts of sports, and it's the biggest sporting weekend in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And the 3 test matches, actually, the viewership outpaced the state of origin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is and the amount of people in the stadiums as well. So that's a big sign that maybe rugby is not as at threat as we might have said, or at least the Australian teams led us on. But now you've seen through these 3 matches, we speak about combinations a lot, and you're slowly starting to see that centre pairing, Ikitau and Suaalii, is very, very good, very impressive. 2 players that complement each other so well. Ikitau's carries on, as first receiver, essentially, was also just unbelievable. He hit the gay line so hard, so often. And then you've got that sort of silky rugby league-esque vibe to Suaalii. That's just exciting. They're both, I think Suaalii is 22, Ikitau is 26. So there's a long partnership ahead there. You got exciting players like Jorgensen on the wing. Liner had his debut at starting, I think, at 10 for Australia, 22 years of age. McDermott, we already spoke about. A couple guys in that forward pack also showing what they've got. I mean, Skelton's been around for a long time and has been a...
Jorgensen and Wright at the back.
Exactly. Yeah. Peach got a lot of plaudits. He doesn't look like much, to be honest.
Yeah, but he came out firing in the third one, right? But he set a tone.
Yeah, but he seems to be just a good old-fashioned winger with a good skill set. I don't know how old he is, but all of a sudden there's a team starting to form there, and you're starting to see an upward trajectory. So I think from that perspective, that's where my B+ comes from. And I think Schmidt can sort of look at it and think now, going into the games in South Africa, there's something to build on. And I hope, I'm not a neutral because I'm a South African and I want to see us wallop them, but I think it does bode well for exciting test matches in South Africa.
I would also have to give them a B+, maybe even an A-, just because of their development throughout the test series. We already spoke about the firing power that the Lions had, and which we believe they didn't utilize to its full capacity. And then considering what Australia has in terms of inexperience and all of these things, and still being able to front up and get it against them and almost do some serious damage to them, I think you've got to really give them kudos for that. So well done to the Australians. Yeah.
I think an interesting observation, this is not something you would ever associate with Australian sports, is they've been almost able to benefit off this underdog sort of title throughout the series. They've been able to, a lot of the guys have just been able to go out there, play, freed up rugby. I think Suaalii has really expressed himself. Ikitau really ran into those British and Irish Lions players with, again, like this attitude of nothing to lose. Jorgensen had a few amazing carries and, scoring tries. And that's the interesting thing. And then that's the problem, is like, how long can you hide in inverted commas behind this title of underdog and keep surprising us? Because at some point, if they really want to take a step up, they're going to have to start growing into something more dominant and a team that becomes favorites again, if they really want to. Because I think the gauntlet they have to lay for themselves is trying to be able to challenge in some sort of way or fashion for that Rugby World Cup in 27 on home soil.
Of course. Yeah.
I think it's easy. I think it's quite easy and it's forgivable for us to say, listen, they're not the top draw. They're not France, New Zealand, and South Africa.
Or Ireland.
No. Sorry, Ireland as well. But how do they could probably upset the apple cart on home soil, and how do they get to that point where they think they can do it? That's the key.
Yeah, Before we go into Australia and their future, especially with the upcoming Rugby Championship, let's talk about play of the Test Series. There's a couple guys who put their hands up. Obviously, World Rugby has decided that is Tagburn. He's the one who left the field with the prestige medal. Who would you say from either side? Who would you say is warranted that title as well?
For me, it's a no-brainer that it's Curry. I just think I think Tom Curry was so good. A lot can be said for Itoje being captain, but I think he was. I think Curry was just so good in each of the Test matches, and also in key moments. You know, there's a tackle that he made in the second Test match that one could say is sort of game deciding when he got ball and all. And just, his presence is just unreal. And his work rate, he's got such a complete skill set as well. So for me, hands down, I would even say Tom Curry.
Nice. Yeah, Tom Curry was definitely an outstanding performer. For me, it would actually be Finn Russell. I think having the likes of Finn Smith and Marcus Smith sort of vying for that position, and you to be so good that it's a no-brainer, and it would almost come as a shock to the system if he hadn't been selected at 10. I think he fully deserved that jersey. This is what we had been saying before the Test series at McGunn, and I'm quite happy to say that he proved us right.
Look, hand of responsibility up for me. I thought he was maybe past it, but
right.
When we were discussing who we thought would start, but he definitely is very much nowhere near past it.
Yeah, sorry, it was Max and I who
exactly.
were in agreement about that, and I thought he played phenomenally well. A fan favorite of mine. I thought that Hugh Grant, I was about to say Hugh Jones. Hugh Grant
actually.
He's just a boy standing in front of a goalpost trying to kick a 3-pointer. No, Hugh Jones, of course, I thought he also played phenomenally well.
Yeah.
Really secured that 13 jersey for himself. Unfortunately, couldn't play as much with Sio Tuipulotu as much as I think he would have liked to, just because of their partnership that they have in the Scotland team. But I think he also deserves an honourable mention.
And I think we should not underestimate how difficult it is for, I would say, Welsh players, particularly at the moment, but even Scottish players, to stake claims to positions in that side, with how dominant the Irish and the English tend to be historically, and
right.
and also the players they produce. So that's also, I think, adds a little bit of a extra flavor to that. The fact that amongst all that competition in a vital position at outside center, to really put on a show like that, amazing. I think if anything, it's maybe a little bit easier if you're a really good fly half like Finn Russell to sort of pull strings. And Finn Russell's also done a lot in the club rugby side of things to kind of help himself there. I think Hugh Jones, if you're playing in the URC, that also adds a flavor to it. You're playing in the URC for a Scottish side. How far are you going to get in the European competitions to really, really put your hand up? So from that perspective, really just on merit to nail down a spot like that is just quite impressive.
So all in all, well done to the British and Irish Lions. They obviously got the win, and I think deservedly so. If it had gone the other way, we would have been saying deservedly so, or even more impressive if the Australians had done it, but that's not how it went down. Looking forward now for the Australians to the Rugby Championship, you're obviously playing against teams that are well put in terms of synergy. They've got lasting combinations, all these different things that the British and Irish Lions didn't have. How do you see them performing within the competition?
I think they have a real opportunity here to continue to build. And I mean this because, first of all, because off the back of this showing, with these pairings and these combinations starting to emerge and these players starting to put their hands up, but also in the context of Argentina really coming off a poor series against England.
Yeah, very poor.
After they win against the British and Irish Lions. That gives them, Australia, the opportunity to go out, beat Argentina. I think that'll be one of the first things on the top of Joe Schmidt's list, is going, we have to beat Argentina. I think, unfortunately, for Australia's sake, Rassie seemed to have said he's going to take the road more travelled with his squad selection against Australia. A couple new faces there, but he was very explicit in saying, I'm going with the boys who have done it for me before. We want to get results. We experimented against Italy and Georgia, which I didn't even find that experimental personally. I would have even maybe wanted him to push the boat out even further. But I think you'll see him go back to a road way more traveled. And on the one hand, it might mean that there's less unknowns for the Australians in preparation. But I think on the other hand, Russie's going to go for really clinical, dominant rugby. And I don't know if that plays into the hands of the Australians.
Are you saying you would have wanted Russie to test more than 50 players in the first 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, he obviously used 50 players throughout the 3 test matches, sure. But I think if you look at some of the guys that didn't even feature at all, I would have wanted to see more. Chituka did play the first two games against Italy. All of a sudden, didn't play against Georgia, and a couple of the guys that just didn't feature at all. Your Kewan Horns, your Ethan Hookers, those guys just not really in the fold. That's what I meant. Let me put it this way. I thought he would have given more debuts.
Okay.
That's kind of what I thought. He would have bled more players from the outset, and that's what he didn't do. So just to clarify there. But yeah, I think that none of that, and I think he means business. I also see an opportunity for Australia in the sense that there is the little bit of an unknown factor with the All Blacks as to where are they at the moment. Yes, they beat the French C team or B team, whatever you want to call it, beat them twice at home. No one can take that away from them, albeit the first game particularly maybe a little bit closer than they would have liked. But is there an opportunity there, or is there at least a phase where Australia maybe are a little less scared of the All Black prospect than in previous years? And can they get themselves up for that and maybe shock them? We spoke about it last week with Maxi and the Bledisloe Cup, and how can we, maybe Australia can really get up for one of those Bledisloe Cup games and try and cause an upset, I think. And that's where I see the opportunity here.
Obviously, Australia's got their first 2 games in South Africa, which is no easy feat for any team to go over and try and win an away game, especially not against the current world champions. I'm just trying to look. So after that, Australia play Argentina at home. Then Australia play Argentina at home again. So those are the 2 games that they play at home. And then it's 1 game in Australia, 1 game in New Zealand for Australia. So going by that, you would think hopefully they can win the 2 Argentina games. Or that's what we would say should be their target, right? Win the 2 Argentina games. Win the New Zealand game at home.
Yeah.
But you don't see them winning the other 3 games, which would be New Zealand at home, South Africa at home twice.
I know exactly what's going to happen here on TikTok.
I'm trying to bait you, dude.
I know exactly what's going to happen. But Australia are not going to beat South Africa in South Africa. I'm very confident on that for a variety of reasons. But the first big reason, particularly at the game at Ellis Park, I believe the first game's at Ellis Park, at altitude.
What are you betting on this? I want to say, like, if we can get 30, 40 likes on this video, whatever the bet is that you now put down, you have to do it.
I will live a whole day of my life in Berlin with one of those stupid fucking cork hat things, Australian cork hat things.
Okay.
The one with the fly swatter. We can even do it on a weekend, maybe even at one of the rugby games we go and watch.
Okay.
I might have to manufacture one myself, or I'll just get on the old Amazon. But I will live a whole day of my life with one of those cork fly swatting hats.
Can I add on to that I would like you to shave your beard so that you only have a moustache?
Oh, jeez.
Just for that day. After that, you can shave the moustache off again.
No, but I like my beard. Wow, that's hectic. Let me think about that one.
We'd say for 50 likes on YouTube.
Oh, no, but so it has to get 50 likes and Australia have to win.
No, Australia's irrelevant.
No, that's a ridiculous bet.
Okay, fine. Australia have to win.
Yeah.
And 50 likes on this video.
Yes, fine.
Okay.
Then I will bet.
Deal.
So I feel pretty confident. I just think it's a step.
Do you feel confident on not getting 50 likes in the video?
No, I actually on both maybe, but prove me wrong on the likes part. I'll enjoy that. No, I think Australia. No. And
okay.
but as I said, I see it as an opportunity. I think if I'm Joe Schmidt and I'm trying to talk to this group of players, I'm saying, hey, we almost shocked the British and Irish Lions when everyone wrote us off. The next step is there's a clear opportunity here to beat Argentina twice on home soil, which I would say largely guarantees them third spot in the standings. Bledisloe Cup, we're playing the All Blacks at home. There's reasons for us maybe not to be as scared of that prospect as in previous years. Let's really get up for the game in Australia, and if they walk away with 3 wins in out of all their matches, I think that's an opportunity grasped to continue to grow some momentum. That's kind of my 2 cents.
In terms of physicality, they've obviously gone through a route that's definitely hardened them for these games. Playing up against your Maro Toji's, your Ellis Genges, your Tom Curry's, the likes of those guys. It's not going to be a shock to the system for them going up against Peter Steph Toy, Adi Sevilla, Matera, all of those big guys. So in that regard, they're definitely ready for it. And I would almost argue more ready for this round of rugby championship than maybe the other teams are in terms of battle hardened.
Also, what I think they need to try and do is try and get, and it's stupid, it's a dumb thing to say because it's so obvious, but depth is a big problem. We saw it in that first test matches. They were missing a couple of the guys against the British and Irish Lions in that first test match, and we're just so far off it. A couple of the guys come back into the fold. Nick White comes back into the fold in the third test match, and that level is just upped majorly. I think that's the big concern for them. I think, again, we spoke about what we need, what they would have wanted and needed to do starting the British and Irish Lions test series, and that was come out firing. They did exactly the opposite. I think the same goes again for if they can have a full 15 of their best players fit, they're going to have to start on the front foot out in South Africa to try and get anything. And that's going to be the key. And if a couple players start to miss, a big physical game against the Springboks, our depth is very impressive. So our boys will go out to hit them hard. Then you start to worry if the guys start falling like dominoes, then there might be a bit of an issue for them.
So for the first time in my life, I'll be supporting Australia when they come to South Africa, just because I would love to see Dominic with a moustache and with one of those Cats. Please do like the video if you would like to see that as well, because we need both of the things to go through for this bet to even take place. A lot of rugby on currently. We're going to move away from the Rugby Championship. We've got schoolboy rugby in South Africa, which is kicked off and is absolutely mal to watch. Mal meaning crazy in Afrikaans. Paul Jim versus Paul Ruas. Paul Ruas losing to Paul Jim. That was quite wild. Grey College playing Grey High and all these different schoolboy teams. We're not going to get into that. But what is something that we should probably mention is the South African ladies beating the Black Ferns. The Black Ferns amongst teams like England, France, maybe Canada and Australia being the top teams in the world, for us to get that win. Obviously playing against a little bit of a weaker side, but it was pretty impressive and it was a pretty dominated win.
You're starting to see within South African rugby the sort of, maybe it's premature because it was against a B Black Fern team, but you're starting to see the sort of level of excellence creep into every part of rugby. And I think it's obviously natural, given the success that the men's side has had. Sevens rugby not going through the best phase after Neil Powell left. All of a sudden we start winning again. There seems to be, a lot of the guys coming from sevens performing well in the Currie Cup now. And now you're starting to see, someone like Swayze de Brain coaching that women's side is a clear sign that there's big plans for that women's team, that they take it very seriously. I no doubt Swayze de Brain would have had a lot of offers from all over the world to coach, and he chose to coach the South African women's team. I think that says a lot. Yeah, and this is the first, again, we spoke about momentum for the Australians. You felt like the South African women's team needed something to kind of maybe just light the fire a little bit.
Yeah.
Massive crowd in Athlone, so that's great to see. That seems to be something that South African rugby is also getting right. They're going into communities that really want these kind of events happening. I think they even offered free seats. I think you could get free tickets.
Okay.
So really filling the stadium. So you're starting to see the success by the men's side, first side, sort of bleed into the other parts. And yeah, let's see how they get on.
Obviously, the World Cup coming up in, I think, 2 months' time, or like just under 2 months' time. So, as you said, taking that momentum from this win is going to be monumentous for them. I don't think we should expect them to be winning the World Cup or anything like that, but definitely very exciting to see the change that's happening there. And there's a lot of players there that were celebrating after that victory against the Black Ferns as if they had won a World Cup. So the emotions are high. People, the gees is there.
And make no mistakes, South African women's sport in all the codes, from football to cricket, now rugby, we've historically been quite a long way behind the other countries that have had full professional women's sides for a long time, and we've caught up to all of them quickly. Banyana won the WAFCON, as they call it, the Women's African Cup of Nations. The Proteas ladies going to various finals now and have closed the gap on all the big teams extremely quickly, and I don't see why this can't happen with the rugby side either. So keep an eye on that for sure.
I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you very much for watching. Well done to British and Irish Lions for winning the series, but also well done for Australia and how they faced up and how they've progressed, because I think the world always enjoys having a solid Wallabies side. And then also our honourable mention goes to the Lady Springboks. Well done to them. Very exciting stuff, and hopefully they can carry this momentum into the World Cup. And other than that, thank you, Dominic.
Yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, head to TikTok, follow us there as well. And next week, I think we'll have the build up to what will be, we'll have a look at maybe what the squad looks like for the Australia game, maybe unpack a couple of the other things happening in the rugby world. And Maxi will be back then, so that's good.
Exactly. Until then, have a great week. Like, comment, subscribe. Cheers.